Okay, so this is Roads and Boats with its rather odd box. I have a very old version. Apparently this is first edition. I also have Planes and Trains. I'm not going to be playing with this in the first game of it. If I throw it in the second game, I'll explain the rules to that at that point. That doesn't add a whole hell of a lot to the game, in terms of rules. So, and it doesn't change the concept of the game very much. So I've always been interested in this one. You know, Splotter has an interesting reputation, as it were. My only other Splotter game I played, VOC over there, was a little disappointing. I enjoy, the cleverness of the blind drawing and all that, but it's really not something that can be played solo. My wife and I had some fun with it. The one that I most wanted was probably Indonesia, and I see there's a reprint coming, but a copy of this that was fairly cheap, and probably should have been a lot cheaper. Had I known this, I bought it over at Board Game Geek through the auctions, and usually those are great. In this particular case, the initial representation was left very open. Nobody really said the condition of the game. And as other people asked questions, I had already jumped a bit in that was, I thought pretty reasonable. And it's not bad for a first edition, I don't think. But the information came out that it's first edition, that no, it only has the one expansion, and then that the box bottom has some discoloration in it, but it doesn't smell. Well, it very clearly has a vague moldish smell to it, so I don't know. The counters, everything seems to be here. Although there are some things that I don't know what they're for. I can't find them in the rules. Maybe these are just tokens for Splotter or something. But, everything was jumbled together more or less. Like one big bag with all the counters in it. The players' pieces were, in their own little player bags. The game gives you those. The stickers hadn't all been applied, which is okay, except that the sticker sheets had gotten kind of damaged, wrinkled up. Some of the stickers had fallen off and lost their stickiness. So I've got a couple that I had to glue on, and then I've got one here. This is a donkey that, I don't know, either the face disappeared on it or that's a blank circle that I'll have to draw a donkey on if I really want one. But again, it's mostly here, and I'm okay. The game comes with this, a big plastic thing that you put over the board so you can draw on it. However, I have my plexiglass. I figure rather than trying to deal with that rollout thing, I'll deal with this. I think some of the more recent versions of the game may have better pieces. I'm not sure. I've seen things with little animeeples. Those are possibly not being sold with it. Those might be, some kind of expansion that people buy or make. I don't know. Okay. So the base goal, but the base idea behind this game is it's a game about transportation. It's a game about building things, but mainly about transporting your materials to where you need them to build them. It has no luck beyond the first. Well, no, it has very little luck beyond the first play of the turn. The solo game has no luck at all. After. Whatever. The scenarios, there's a set of scenarios given in the book, and then there's others online and some in the expansions as well. Give you fixed kind of balance positions, and I felt that was kind of important. Not always. Some of them give you fixed unbalanced positions. Like this one, for example, is supposed to be for two more skilled players up near the boats and two less skilled players. And I really kind of wish I had done that one, because this one is so symmetric. These guys are too. There's another option in the game, which is that you can build your own board as the players, and it gives some instructions for how to go about that. I'm not sure that they're completely hammered down, but essentially The players decide what their board's going to look like, and then they decide where they want to be on the board. That would work fine, except that there are only certain... You kind of have to have certain things to start the game. Otherwise, you're going to be at a disadvantage. And you kind of want your terrain to be of a certain nature to start the game. And I think the selection... So it's not like a random tile selection. You have tons and tons of pieces. Look at all this and then more here. In order to build all kinds of different boards. And the game has a certain length. The bigger the board you're going to make, the less contact people are going to have with each other. And there's just, you know, a number of things that you'd have to understand the game pretty well, I think, to be able to successfully participate in building a board and selecting a starting position. I've fiddled around with unsuccessfully one of the solo scenarios and then decided, okay, let's just go for this and video it. So I made mistakes in the solo scenario, including some pretty big ones that made me walk away. There's a good chance I'm going to make mistakes here. There are other people who've explained the rules. I'm going to do it because that's what I do. But if you really want to look at try to understand the rules, I'd suggest looking towards some of the other people there. If you want to get a brief overview of the game, there's other people who do that better. This is really just sort of the prerequisite to me playing the game and people who don't want to look at other people's stuff, understanding the context in which I'm playing it. Okay, so I guess a few more things. Each player has a bunch of these discs that have different symbols on them for different types of transport. Like I said, it's a game mainly about transport. You've got your donkeys, you've got wagons, trucks, rafts, rowboats, and steamships. These are going to serve as walls in order to, you place them on spaces, on borders between areas, and they prevent other people from transiting through those areas. Now you're able to take these walls down, and we'll get to that in a moment. Player also has these, which are going to be bricks that are put over here. Now this is the timer for the game. Altogether, we're building like a wonder. And you get victory points for completing the wonder, for completing portions of it. But one piece of it gets built every turn. And eventually when you get up to, based on the number of players, a certain space, the wonder will be complete, the game ends, and people count their score. The score is going to be based on money, how much money you have. Hey, I don't have any money. All I got is some planks of wood and what look like bales of hay that are just rocks. I got a house and some geese. No, you don't have those. But they're available too. But anyway, your goal is going to be to take stuff to build the wonder and take stuff that is going to produce you money and get the money. I don't know if the money has to be back at your home. I think on any of your transports is fine. The wonder, the only way you can build the wonder is in your home space. Each player has a home space. They're absolutely not differentiated, which is somewhat troublesome, but whatever. Okay. Each player also has a technology chart, which has different things that you can't build at the beginning of the game. Unfortunately, and I may change this, the rules suggest you have these little beads on it at the beginning of play, and you take them off as you get technologies. That may make some sense in terms of, oh, now I can build this. What it doesn't make much sense in is, oh, what technologies might I want to develop? There's a series of them. See if we can find them. Rowboats, steamships, trucks, oil rigs, and then there's enhancements to mining. This one allows you to, two of these allow you to help control how many pieces you put in a bag when you produce mines. One of them allows you to choose whether to take just iron or just gold. The other one allows you to put more of each in. And this final one allows you to build additional shafts off a single mine, which is to basically replenish how much crap there is in the mine. We'll get to those in a little bit. What about the other counters? Well, what we have on the board, everybody starts with 3 donkeys, their home space, 2 geese in it, the brick, and a bunch of wood. Geese are kind of weird in this. As you can see, they're following the donkey, and that is very much in the theme of the game. You also have, and this was the randomization, a set of these, the praying counters, which are going to help determine your order of play, which is represented on these. This is the turn order for the game, which is represented as, I don't know, some sort of production, transport, building, and then monument, the wonder construction. Over here you have a bunch of resources, like this is iron, this is gold, these are geese. And then you also have some factories or production locations. Now, there's 2 kinds of production locations. There's primary and secondary. Primary ones, if you can build it, which might be dependent on terrain, it'll produce stuff for you. Well, it'll produce stuff. Whose it is, that depends on who grabs it. Secondary production, you have to have the stuff that it processes available, and then it will produce different stuff. And there's a whole set on the player aid that explains this. So for example, if you have a woodcutter in the space, it's going to produce a bunch of logs, and that makes sense. In order to build the woodcutter, you have to give him 3 planks of boards. At the beginning of the game, you're going to need a source of wood. You're going to need to be able to turn it into planks, and you're going to need a source of stones. Without those things, you're not going anywhere, and that's one of the reasons why setting up the board, if you picked a bad starting location on the board, or if you set up the board poorly, it could well be that people just can't get a good start in the game. The player aid also lists the sequence of play, victory conditions up here, how you set up the mines, and then movement points and carrying capacity for the various different kinds of transports that you have. All right. This goes over setup of the game, which I've slightly explained. Your sequence of play is pretty simple. First you're going to do productions and reproduction. Then you're allowed to move. Well, so each of these sequence steps is done by all the players, and it'll be done largely in this order. Now, you have some interesting input into the player order. In fact, that is the conflict mechanism of the game, is determining what the player order is. So each player does their production in player order, then each player does movement, then each player does building, then each player does their wonder construction. In reproduction, what you do is you look for the square pieces that are primary producers, which I think is probably this setup here, and you see what they make. They can only be built in certain areas. You don't have to worry too much about it. You simply take the material that they have. So for example, if there's a woodcutter that somewhere in the forest, which is where you'd have to be, you'd simply take logs and put it on top of this. Now, in player order, each person has the option to, who's present there with a transporter, has the option to take the resources just generated and put them aboard their transport item. Let us explain the conflict mechanism, because this is going to come into play again and again. We're not going to explain it again and again. But this is kind of the key to the whole thing, because, hey, I want those logs on my donkey, you know? All right, so normally you can play pretty simultaneously. Early in the game, nobody's going to be intervening with each other at all. It's this particular scenario, it's probably not going to happen until the mountains are in place, because they're kind of things both sides have to go out of their way to get to. It's too much work to build roads to somebody else's territory to raid their stuff, especially since those roads, first of all, so the other guy can shut them down with a wall, and secondly, they can traverse the road just as well to get to your stuff, right? All right. So the way the player sequencing goes is that each player gets to decide whether or not he wants to reorder the player sequencing. And that is done okay. So you have your praying figure up here near the temple. And the praying figures will correspond to what order you can choose when to be in the sequence of play. And what we've got here is the guy who's furthest out, who's doing the least praying, is the most interested in the world. Therefore, he gets to go first every time. And that's probably what it will usually work out to be. So each player gets to decide whether to keep their praying figure or to bump him to the back of the line in order. This starts with the player whose figure is closest to the temple. But if more than one player chooses to do it in the same phase, the person who is closest to the temple is going to be the furthest away. So essentially what's happening is this is the most powerful position, or this is the most valuable position to be sitting in at any given point, but this is the most powerful because you can immediately bump yourself into the most valuable position for that round, for that particular conflict. And then from then on, you'll be sinking down back towards the temple. And then whoever's furthest from the temple gets to put his sequence marker wherever he likes on the track, and will probably take first, because you almost always want to go first. In general, whenever there's any kind of dispute about who gets to do something, the person with the first choice to do it is the first player in the fight. And that's important. So if we're sitting on the same resource production, well, the guy who gets to grab it first is the guy who is in the number one space. So after primary production, everybody gets to grab the stuff that's in the space in the order that's been determined at this point. You can demand a change at that point. And then you do the secondary production, and this is directed by the players. So starting with the first player, secondary production starts to get cranked through. The reason this is important is because you may want to use certain resources at certain secondary factories rather than at certain other ones. There's also, and this is what I screwed up, an output limit to what you can produce. So for example, a sawmill only produces a maximum of 6, I guess, of these boards. Now this is not clear to me of whether the maximum is the maximum number of times you can do this input to output transfer, or the maximum number of pieces of output you can produce. But this is important because when I was playing, I wasn't paying attention to that output max, and I unfortunately built a paper mill right next to my sawmill and logging, and well, the logs were turning into boards, and then they were turning into paper immediately, and there was nothing I could do. Because if players don't choose to fulfill all the capacity with their ability to make choices as to, which things get produced, well, then whatever's left in the space continues to be produced by the factories. What's not explained there is any kind of ordering for it. And what I'm going to do is, if there are ties and there's no player around to run things, they're going to go in order as listed on the sheet. That seems like a fair assumption. Okay, one more production thing that I haven't mentioned, which actually is sort of a primary production, I guess, is livestock. If you have precisely 2 donkeys or geese in an empty pasture, i.e. a pasture that doesn't have a building in it, and it can be your home building, that doesn't hurt it, then they get an extra one. If you have 3, nope, that would be against God. I don't know. Yeah, maybe they'd all end up the same gender if there are 3 of them. I have no idea. All right. So while you're producing whatever, your little transporters on the thing can dump the goods they have and pick up different goods as their turn order allows them. And in particular, this is important. So donkeys only carry 2 stuff, whereas other things carry more. So you stack those on top of what they'll be. All right, movement. Movement's actually pretty simple. You can move a number of spaces. So a donkey can move 1 space. But if it's along the roads, it can move 2 spaces. That's what this hard dash means here. Later, wagons and trucks only move on roads. So you better get some roads going if you want to improve your transport technology over land. On the sea side of things, we have the raft, the rowboat, and the steamship all moving a certain number of spaces. And they can sail into a space, dump some stuff off, sail back. The problem here is stuff is only owned by you when it's on your transporter, which means anybody can go pick up anything they like otherwise. So you can't leave stuff stockpiled somewhere. You've got no safety there unless you're sure nobody can get there. Boats are a little funky in that they're allowed to only move over water, but they're allowed to kind of land on a land space, and they stay adjacent to the water space that they entered from, and that's where they're going to where they're going to set sail from. While they're on the land space, they can interact with the land space. I don't have any rivers on the board. We've got some here. You can basically sail into a hex with a river, and it's sort of like you're in the land. Now, the river divides the hex, and in general, you can't move stuff across the river unless somebody builds a bridge. There are also walls, which, if a wall is up, only the player who controls the wall can cross it. So let's talk a little bit about how these are built. So if you want to build a road, you pay a stone, and then you're able to draw a line from the space you paid the stone from to the center of an adjacent land space. And now you have a road there. Those don't go away. If you want to pay a bridge, it's also a stone, and it allows you to connect your roads on one side of the river to roads on the other side of the river. And any buildings or anything that are on one side or the other are now also kind of accessible. Everybody can walk around and grab whatever they like. It's like deleting the river for the purpose of land movement. The boats can still sail down the river. You don't dam it up. Mine shafts, in order to expand to a new mine shaft, and this requires that you have this research level, it's going to cost you, it looks like, an iron and an FU. I don't know what an FU is. There it is. That's got to be fuel. Yeah. Okay. walls are kind of interesting. So walls are going to cost you a rock to build one layer of wall. And then the second layer of wall costs 2 stones, the third layer 3, etc. It costs you more if you're building the rock from the sea and trying to block off a land zone. Now, it's possible to demolish walls as well. I'm not seeing the rule for that, but essentially it costs you 2 boards to demolish a wall. It costs you 1 more board than what it costs to build the wall. And what happens when you demolish a wall is you replace it with a neutral thing. So the walls become harder to build and demolish the more of them get put in a space. Warfare gets more and more expensive. All right. I haven't explained the movement of geese. Whenever a transporter moves through an area, or leaves an area, any geese that are in that area can follow it if you want them to. You can chase them away. And that's why there are geese following the donkey here. This applies with airplanes when they come out, with boats, although geese can't be left in the water. In fact, if you somehow bring geese out to water and don't land on land, whoever goes through that water next, they automatically follow him. They just don't want to stay there. Okay. So I've explained most of the stuff you build and what happens. Mines are a little funky comparatively. Now, building won't happen unless you have a transporter there. So these buildings that occur, they won't just randomly happen. Secondary production will happen, but you won't build a sawmill if you just have the materials kicking around for a sawmill. They'll just sit there until somebody does something with them, either takes them and drags them away or builds something with them. Okay. Mines are one of the things you can build. When you build a mine, and I guess we can look to see how much that costs. It costs you 3 wood and a stone. You get a mine, you get one of these, and it has a number on it. Mines can only be built in the mountains, which is this brown stuff. I haven't explained. This is rock, this is mountains, desert, pasture, forest, water. Okay, when you build a mine in the mountains, you find the correct bag. All these bags are numbered as well, and this is a horrible design decision. Let's put these in a clear bag. You put, I believe it's 4 iron and 4 gold into that bag. And then every turn when it produces, you shuffle it up and draw one at random. If you don't like randomness in a game, you can follow the solitaire rule, which is that you draw them out according to a fixed schedule. I believe the gold comes out first, then the iron, then the gold, then the iron, alternating. Whichever one has the most gets drawn out first, with gold winning ties or something like that. Now, when you build a mine, if you have a special technology, you can affect what its starting stuff is. And instead of, one of the abilities allows you to put only iron or only gold in it, if you want to focus on one. One of the special abilities allows you to put an extra piece of each in it. And then finally, the last special ability having to do with mines, the last technology having to do with them, allows you to redig the mine, essentially. And when you redig a mine, you pay, and here this is spelled out, you get 3 of each, 4 of either one, or 5 of each, depending on the technology. When you rebuild a mine, it's going to cost you an iron and a fuel to do, because it's no longer, you're not just scratching the surface anymore, you're going down deeper. Now, I think you can do that indefinitely. Yeah, you can keep digging the mine deeper and deeper once you have that technology. Here's the demolishing. Okay. All right. Some special cases, like if you wall over a boat that's docked, it gets shoved back out to sea. All right, at the end of the sequence, you hit the wonder construction phase, and this is going to allow you to buy bricks. And basically, anything in your home area, I don't think you need a transporter even, you're able to cash in any kind of resource you like to get some of these bricks. And you just start lining them up here. Now this is one reason the first player this is the only thing the first player has any kind of disadvantage on it. Because whoever goes last goes later. And bricks might be worth more the later you go. I seem to remember something like that. We'll get to that when we get to the victory conditions. Also, once everybody's gotten a chance to place their bricks, we'll put a neutral white brick on the board. Hey, the game's gonna end. Now this has a couple of effects. When you hit here, I don't know what happens. When you hit here, all the deserts become fertile. You don't have to replace them, you just have to remember that. When you hit the number of players, the game ends. Let's see what that is. Oh, so I lied about the number of bricks. The first brick costs you 1 good. The second one costs you 2. The third one costs you 3. It's like the walls, except it's per turn. So you probably want to invest in generating some of these every turn just to keep you in the running in victory points. But they're not the only thing that produces victory points, of course. I do not see anything to do with this mark. I don't know what that is. Oh, that's the 5th row. Yeah. Okay, this increases the cost of the first brick. So as long as the first 4 rows have not been fully built, the first brick costs 1. Buying 3 bricks, yeah. Bricks bought by other players do not count. As soon as the first 4 rows have been fully built, the first brick costs 2 goods instead. So this increases the cost of the wonders and makes them more painful to buy. That's what it is. Okay. Research. Research is just on during your production phase. You expend stuff for research. It just costs you 2 geese and a piece of paper because you need the geese to write with. Even when you have trucks and everything, you still need geese to write. There's a lot of silliness in this game. Let's just put it that way. And when you get a research, you uncover one of these. Now I may again reverse this and have them all uncovered to begin with and cover them up as you have them because it just seems more, it seems clearer to me to do it that way. And how about winning? Okay. So some of the goods are money based. You have, and these are worth victory points at the end of the game. So each gold nugget you have is worth 10. Each set of coins you have is worth 40, and each stock certificate you have is worth 120. These have to be on board your transporters for you to score them. You can't like tuck them away and save them in your house or something and have them score. And in order to get these, you need, for example, a mint to convert gold and fuel into coins. And you need a stock exchange to convert coins and paper into stocks. So you've got a direction that you want your production to get to. There's certain production that you want to make to get you to a victory. But there's more. You also get victory points for the bricks in the wonder. Each row of the wonder is worth 10 points divided evenly. So no, actually the lower levels are the worthwhile ones. So if I had all the bricks here, I would get 10 points in this. Now let's see how this is. These are divided evenly among the player bricks. This is important because neutral bricks don't take any space. So if 3 of these bricks fill up in the neutral zone, well, whoever places here gets 10 points. That's something you probably don't want to allow happen. And that's about it. My impression from the solo game that I played is that this was really, really just the starting level to the game was kind of a painful puzzle, an optimization puzzle if you like, but actually there's even a lower level. It's a puzzle, which is just to kind of, not a very hard one at all, which is just to get over the hump of being able to do anything at all. Where this game gets interesting is where people start competing directly by going in and grabbing each other's stuff. In a way, it's sort of if you don't have the competition, it's a very, very stripped down Euro, where you're just trying to optimize your paths and routes to the best you can and the things you build and getting them to crank out the points that you want. But there's going to be conflict because there are these mountains here, and that's where the gold is, and the gold is the victory points, right? Eventually, at least. Gold nuggets are worth something, but they're the things that you want to bring back to your production to turn into coins and stock certificates. So that's going to spark whatever player interaction there really is this. There's this central fighting area in this scenario. You could build scenarios where everybody's completely off on their own. You could actually segment the board so everybody's got their own little board. Maybe even get to design their own little board and they play competitive solitaire. I have no idea, the extent to which you could change this game. But where it gets any interest at all comes to that competition. I'm just worried that the barrier to entry of that optimization puzzle is difficult enough for me that I'm not going to enjoy it terribly much. But we'll see. I can certainly see why some people would like this a lot from what I'm looking at. All right, let's send it up.